It says, any yeast and any honey you shall not bring from it to the a fire to God.
So we're going to learn from this
now, one second.
all the other things.
Kol shehu mimenu leishim. Anything from it is on the fire. You're not allowed to bring. Leisaktiru mimenu. Anything that goes on the fire, you're not allowed to bring what's left over. It doesn't have to do with the yeast and the honey. It has to do with the words. Leisaktiru mimenu isha la'Hashem. Anything that has a part of it that goes on the fire, then you don't offer it up. Okay. The Gemara asks, one second. We have another Bais somewhere. It's a long Bais on Daf Samach. Discusses different activities of the mincha. Do you have to bring it close to the mizbeach? Do you wave it? And all of these things. And it tries to learn one from another. And the Gemara over there says, one second, it says, V'shtei alechem lechem apanim yesh mehem leishim. But the shtei alechem, the two breads, and the lechem apanim go on the fire. That you're telling me that if you put this on the fire, you're going to violate this prohibition? Nothing, no part of the two breads or the showbread go on the fire. V'hatanya, we have a brisa. Yotzu shtei alechem alechem apanim she'em mehem leishim. The brisa in that discussion over there in Daf Samach says that the two breads and lechem apanim don't have anything that goes on the fire when it's in comparisons to other things. And so Amar Rav Shesha say migufa leishim. Yes, that's true. You don't have a section of the sacrifice of the mincha itself that goes on the fire, but it does have something that goes on the fire that permits it. So by the shtei alechem, it's the two sheep, and by the lechem apanim, it's the two spoonfuls of frankincense. So those things go on the fire, and that allows everything else to be eaten. But what it means is that these, once those are brought, these are not allowed to go on because the matir was already brought. Now you don't bring up the rest of the sacrifice. Okay. Itmar was stated. Hamala mikulam al gabi kevesh. Let's say you bring from all of these things onto the ramp. You didn't bring it onto the altar, but you brought it onto the ramp. Rabbi Yochanan amar chayev, Rabbi Elazar amar pater. Rabbi Elazar is a student really of Rabbi Yochanan. Student friend. After Rish Lakish dies, Rabbi Elazar was the one that was meant to take over Rish Lakish to be Rabbi Yochanan's chavrusa, and Rabbi Yochanan wasn't satisfied with him because he instead of arguing with him, he would always bring a proof why Rabbi Yochanan's right. So Rabbi Yochanan says, "I know that I'm right. I don't need any proofs that I'm right." Rish Lakish used to ask me questions. And then we would clarify things, but you're just telling me that bringing proofs that I'm right. What do I gain from that? Whenever I see a machlekes, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar, I'm always thinking, Rabbi Elazar should have discussed this point that he argues with him, and then they would have clarified it. See, we have a machlekes right here. In the end, Rabbi Yochanan wasn't happy, and he asks to die. I think.
Who has to die?
I think Rabbi Yochanan wants to die because he doesn't have a chavrusa.
Is that really?
I think that's how the Gemara concludes it. So I assume that Rabbi Elazar felt that in his state it would be better to appease Rabbi Yochanan and not to argue with him, because he does argue with him. You see here he argues with him, but over there he just lost his Rabbi Yochanan.
This is a big
Rabbi Yochanan
argument.
had a very difficult life. He lost his father and his mother when he was young. His father died before he was born. His mother died very early, so the Gemara Kedushin said that he didn't violate Kibbutz Avim.
Yeah. Violate Kibbutz Avim? No, he never had an opportunity.
Right.
He never had an opportunity.
I think also it says that he is. Rabbi Yochanan lost 10 children. He lost 10 children. 10 children. They all died
while he was alive.
Yeah. He wore a ring of one of the bones of his youngest son or something that died.
Wow.
So yeah, he had a very difficult life. And then probably Rabbi Elazar assumed that I'm going to start attacking him. He just lost his chavrusa, his brother-in-law as well. I'm going to bring him a proof. So okay, anyway, Rabbi Elazar argues with Rabbi Yochanan here about bringing the things that are not allowed to be brought on the altar if they're brought up to the ramp. Rabbi Yochanan says he's chayiv. The ramp is considered the altar, and Rabbi Elazar says pater. Rabbi Yochanan amar chayiv. Rabbi Yochanan says he's chayiv. The Tanya was taught in the brisa mizbeach. the verse says that it's a continuation of that pasuk that we had before. Kichol sar v'chol dvash. You don't bring any yeast up. Then it goes on. It says, however, korban reishis you do bring up. The first sacrifice you do bring up. However, you don't put it on the altar. So it says over here, but you don't bring it up on the altar. So mizbeach, Eily al mizbeach. I only know the altar. Kevesh minayin. How do you know that you can't bring it to the ramp either? Talmud leimer v'ela mizbeach layalo. It says v'ela mizbeach. And to the mizbeach, that's coming to include also the ramp. Rabbi Lazar Amar Pater, my timer. What's the reason for Rabbi Lazar that he says Pater? Damakra sar udvash, yeast and honey. Korban reishis takrivu oisam. However, you bring a korban reishis, you do bring sa'ar and dvash. You bring the first fruits, and you bring also the first the two breads. Oisam hu de Rabbi lach kevesh k'mizbeach. For them, we say that the ramp is like the altar, because those are brought to the ramp.
So wait, this is proving Rabbi Elazar is saying potter, right? If you bring he's saying if you bring anything up to the ramp, you're potter. But he's only talking about these two things, right? The lechem. He's only specifying two things here, right? What about all the other things? How's he proving all the other things from this pasuk? He's
saying the opposite. He's saying this pasuk tells me.
Okay. Which one? Sarah Dvash, right?
Sarah Dvash that has the word that says in it ve'elam mizbeach, which includes, according to Rabbi Yochanan, which includes the ramp. So he's saying that where do I have this inclusion of the ramp? That's only for these two sacrifices.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and everything else you'd be potter.
Everything else, the ramp isn't counted as the altar.
Okay.
So it must be that these two are not brought to the ramp either. So that's the. But for other things, the ramp is not like the altar. Okay. For Rabbi Yochanan, what does Rabbi Yochanan do with Oisam? It says these two things. It says Miboy Leila Kedetanya. Rabbi Yochanan uses it for what it was taught in a brisa. Okay, so now we're going to have this brisa here that's going to be explaining the Oisam, which is referring to the Shtei Alechem and the Bikurim, which are the only things that are yeast and honey. And it says honey. It's referring to fruits.
And we said by those two things.
Those are the only things that are brought to the Beis Hamikdash that are
honey. You're not allowed to be.
Honey, you're not allowed, but except Bikurim, which has honey in it because it's fruits. So it's fructose. That's what it means. It's which is brought to the temple, and it's considered a sacrifice. So Rabbi Yochanan says, "I need the Oisam to teach me something." It's taught in the brisa. Is it possible that a person can bring Shtei Alechem and Bikurim just as a donation, not as an obligation, just separately? The Korani Bal Maitzis Vasachat Tishma Vasisa, and I'll apply the verse that you should keep what comes out of your mouth, and you should guard it. Talmud Laima, the pasuk says, "Korban reishis takrivu." Tzibar amarti lach v'la yachid. The community brings it, but not an individual. Okay. So I only know that the community brings these sacrifices, and an individual should not bring them. So there's no yachal layeh yachin maybe shein maybe chavasakiyetziba. Maybe you've just excluded the individual because the individual doesn't have the obligation to bring it. The obligation is only on the community. Aval Yetziver maybe Chayvasa Kiyetziba. But let's say the community could bring it. Let's say the altar or whatever. There's not a lot of activity in the temple. They want to do something else with the money that they have in the treasury. They're going to bring. Okay, let's bring bikurim again. Let's do the two breads again. So we'll have something happening here.
Practically speaking, that probably didn't happen, though. I'm sure.
Well, why not? Talmud Laimar. Oh, practically that there was no money there?
No, that there was time, that they had time on their hands to do.
No, it says that there were things that sometimes they would bring sacrifices when the altar was empty, just so something should be burning there. Ketzam Mizbeach. Talmud Laimar Isam. It says them. It says you only bring them. You don't bring these as donations. Okay. Mayesh lecha lahavi. What did they bring? Shtei alechem min asar, ubikurim min advash. You bring the shtei alechem from the yeast, the two breads that were. They had yeast.
Sir does not mean chametz, right? Like both of them is real. What?
The sa'ar means sourdough, which means that it does become chametz. These two breads were the exception.
Okay. Yeah,
the exception.
Gotcha.
This is the shvuas.
Right.
Ubikurim min advash, and bikurim comes from honey. Bikurim, the first fruits, has fruit, the fruit sugar, which is considered honey. The Gemara asks, Shtei alechem le'yikravu nedava. The shtei alechem wasn't allowed to be brought as a donation. That's what you just said. V'hatanya, we have a brisa. Im nemar kol sa'ar, lama nemar kol davash. Okay. It says, Ki chol sa'ar v'chol davash le'saktir meinish isha l'Hashem. Because all yeast and all honey you shall not bring. Now the word kol teaches me, even if it's half a measurement. So it didn't need to say a half a measurement of yeast. The extra word kol is including, not only if it's a full measurement, a full kaimetz or whatever, but even if it's half a kaimetz. It didn't need to say kol davash. It could have just said kol by one of them and I would have understood. Kol sa'ar udvash. Why does it have to repeat the kol twice? Vim nemer kol davash, lama nemer kol sa'ar. It says no, because they're very different. I would have said only the one that kol is said by. That's the one that half a measurement is a problem. Neshiyesh b'sa'ar, masha'im b'dvash, v'yesh b'dvash, masha'im b'sa'ar, because they're very distinct. Sa'ar huta mechlali b'mikdash. The sa'ar has an exception in the temple, that there's a time that it's permissible. You have to see what that is. Dvash lo yuta mechlala b'mikdash, but dvash does not have an exception. It's never permissible. One second. Dvash yuta b'shiyari menachos. However, the dvash, besides for this obligation
of shvuos,
yeah, is referring to besides for this the obligatory. Dvash, I'm allowed to take honey and eat my carbon mincha with honey. I don't know. I'm not allowed to offer the kaimetz up with honey. But the remnant of the mincha that I'm going to eat, I'm allowed to take my pancakes and dip it in syrup. Right? My mincha pancakes, I'm allowed to have syrup with it, honey. However, sa'ar, lo yuta b'shem mincha, but I'm not allowed to make it yeast. I'm not allowed to let it rise, so I'm limited there. Right? The way you eat the rest of the mincha, you can have syrup, but you can't make it yeast. So you see that dvash is different than sa'ar. So it has to tell me by each one. So it has to tell me both because they're very distinct. The problems, the restrictions of each of them are very different. The Gemara asks now, what do you mean that yeast has an exception in the temple other than what we know? It says, Lav shtei alechem de karvan adav. It must be that you're allowed to bring a shtei alechem as a donation. Right? This was the whole proof to say shtei alechem can't come as a donation because Rabbi Yochanan brought a brisa that says, Oisam, you only bring them, but you never bring it another time. You can't bring it as an adava.
Right.
We said, what do you mean you can't bring it as an adava? We have a brisa that says that Sa'ar is Huta Mechlalai. It sounds like when is the exception? It must mean that you can bring Shtei Alechem. Amar Rav Amram. Loi Likariv Imahem. What we're talking about is that there's two sheep that comes along with the Shtei Alechem. This somehow means Chutz Mechlali B'Mikdash. Let me see what the commentary here says. What it means is that the Shtei Alechem and the sheep are so considered one sacrifice that it's considered surprising that you were allowed to offer the sheep on the altar. Even though it's one sacrifice with the yeast, with the Shtei Alechem, the two sheep are one sacrifice, the Gemara considers that, there's an exception here, that you're allowed to offer those sheep on the altar. That's what it means. Okay. Gemara says, Yihachi Bikurim Nami. So you said that Bikurim never has anything that's offered together with it. That's why you said that you need to say Kol Dvash separately than Kol Sa'ar, because you wouldn't compare them together. They're so different. But it's not true. The Tanan, there's a Mishnah, Hagoisla Shal Gabi Asalin Hayoilis. Vasalin Shibiyadin Tanim Lakayanim. It says if there's birds that are on top of the basket of Bikurim, those birds are brought up as Oilas. So, hey, look at what's going on. You're bringing things on the altar that come together with the honey. The birds. Oh. You just said that the Shtei Alechem has the two sheep that come along. Well, guess what? By Bikurim you have two birds I don't know how many birds. It says birds that could come along with the eating off the, they had grain there. The birds would like it. They would come. So the Gemara says no. Hano liyata bikurim hudasa. Those aren't really considered part of the sacrifice. Those are just crowns. The later is like a crown for the bikurim. Auxiliary. What was the word that you used?
Ancillary.
Ancillary.
I think is that the word? Ask.
I thought it was a nuisance.
You thought it was a nuisance?
Yeah, these birds that are showing up to eat part of your bikurim and they're hanging around.
Everything can be used for everything has to be used for kedusha.
A neighbor of mine, a non-Jewish fellow, he helps me out sometimes with my yard often. So he has this bird that comes down into his tree, and it chirps away, and he gives it peanuts and stuff, and it comes and sits on his shoulder. It's a blue jay, I guess. Anyway, he went away for a week. He gave me schach. He cut down his bamboo. He gave me his bamboo. He has bamboo growing, beautiful bamboo. It's like spectacular. So I used it for schach. Anyway, he went away for a week. And these birds that I always see in his thing, I wouldn't recognize if it's these birds or other birds, but they come to to my schach and they're chirping away on it. They must have recognized its branches. Yeah, I can't feed them on Yom Tov. You don't feed your stray. They're not mine. Right. They're just. But anyway, okay. So these birds would come into these baskets. Maybe they're the bird. They recognize the food. No, when it comes to food, they're going to go to wherever they can get it. Okay. That's the Oisam, that you can't bring these as donations. That's what we wanted.
That's why
I'm sorry?
That's why we can't feed the
That's why we don't
fishes.
feed the fish, yeah. It's interesting that the tradition is, well, I don't know if it's a mistaken tradition, but we always used to hear that you go feed the fish.
On Shabbos? What do you mean?
On Shabbos, on Rosh Hashanah. As a kid, I remember in school learning that I'm not allowed to.
Oh, when I was,
But before I learned that in school, I always thought that that's what you do, and that you go, you empty your pockets, and you throw it in.
I think that's what
There's still
the conservative or, I mean, I grew up doing it when I was a kid. That's what we thought the fish were doing. They were eating our sins.
Did you understand that you're supposed to empty your pockets and
I
put the crumbs
used to
in?
bring bread. I used to bring bread.
Yeah,
My mother would tell me, she's not yet, but that's our tradition. We put bread in our pockets and we go and we feed the fish on Rosh Hashanah. That's what I remember.
That's amazing. There must be something to. Okay, Boy Rami Barchama Rav Chizda. Oh, so interesting. Rami Barchama asks his father-in-law Rav Chizda a question. This is a very interesting question. We said that anything that's put on the altar, you're not allowed to put the rest of it on the altar. Chatas ha'oif is a very unique sacrifice, that the blood is put on the altar, but no part of it is burnt on the altar. It's just eaten by the kayanim. So he's asking, anything that's burnt on the fire, the Torah says, the Eibishter says, this doesn't have anything that's put on the fire. So, if I would put it on the fire, it won't be a violation. Or, or do I say that it's considered a sacrifice, and that's good enough, and that it shouldn't be put on the altar, whatever's not meant to be. Amarlei, so Rav Chisda responds, it's called a sacrifice, it doesn't go on the altar. Kitanoi, this is actually Machlekes Tanoim. Rabbi Eliezer Aimer, this is Rabbi Eliezer the Tana, not Rabbi Elazar that we were discussing before. Rabbi Eliezer is always Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes. He was the one that he was sent out of the yeshiva. He was put in Cherem when he disagreed with the.
His father was Greek.
No, not a Greek, but he had those days they had names, Horkenes and names like that, Antigonus.
What was up with that? If the Yidden were saved from Mitzrayim,
right?
Because their names.
The Ramosha writes about this. He says that.
Feinstein?
Yeah, because they had all these names. The question was today, what type of name? All the German people and Austrian people, they all had Hartwig, Ludwig. They had all of these names.
From Yidden.
Yeah, because they gave them a list of names that you had to choose from. You couldn't just make up a name. So he said that by Mitzrayim, they didn't have the Torah, so what kept them Jewish? And once the Torah was given, then it's not the name that makes it. Okay.
Wow,
so Rabbi Eliezer says, Kol shamimeno leishim, anything that from the sacrifice goes on the fire, then the rest of the sacrifice is not allowed to be. It's bebal taktiru, it's not allowed to be offered on the fire. Rabbi Akiva Eimer, Rabbi Akiva says, he argues with Rabbi Eliezer, Kol sheshmai karban. Anything that's called a sacrifice is not allowed to go on the fire if it's not meant to be on the fire. Which the Gemara says, "My beinayo." What's the difference between them? So Rav Chisda comes back into this and he tells us, "Besar chatas ha'oif beinayo." It's the meat of the chatas ha'oif, which the chatas ha'oif, the bird sin offering, is not put on the fire. Only the blood goes on the fire. So you're not allowed to put the bird on the fire, according to Rabbi Akiva. Rav says, like Shem and Shal Mitzayra Kabinayu. It's interesting that Rav Chisda is coming before Rav. Rav was well before Rav Chisda. Rav's son-in-law was Rav Chanan bar Rava, whose son-in-law was Rav Chisda. So it's like 2 generations removed. Okay, he gives us another example. It doesn't go on the fire, and therefore I'm not allowed to put it on the fire according to Rabbi Akiva. And I'm still not allowed to put it on the fire according to Rabbi Akiva because it's called a carbon. It's the oil of the Mitzayra which doesn't go on the fire. It gets sprinkled, it gets put on his thumbs, and the Tani Levi Kol Karbanam L'Rabbeis Loik Shem and Shal Mitzayra is proving that Loik Shem and Shal Mitzayra is called a carbon. And so therefore, according to Rabbi Akiva, it can't go on the fire. According to Rabbi Eliezer, it can go on the fire. It's not. You don't have the prohibition because no part of it went on the fire. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. It says in the pasuk Sa'ar. What's the Bach saying here? Leisaktiru. Sa'ar should not be burnt on the altar. Eily ela kulei. I only know if it's the whole kaimetz. Miktsase minayin. How do I know part of the kaimetz is also not allowed to go on the altar? Talmud Laimar. In other words, if it's yeast.
Kol.
Talmud Laimar kol. That's coming to include even if it's not the full.
Wait, where does it say kol? Wait a second. So it's the Tana Rabbanan Ser Baal Tiktiro Eily Ella Kolam Miktsase. Okay, that's kol from before. Which kol?
It says like this: Kol mincha asher takriv al Hashem leisi yasachametz. Ki chol sa'ar v'chol davash leisaktir min ishel Hashem.
Oh, so that kol.
So it says kol by both, by sa'ar and by davash. Okay, so it says kol sa'ar. So I know that even part of the kaimetz should not be yeast, should not be made chametz. Eruvay minayin. Let's say it's a mixture. It's a taruvus of yeast and matzah, of chametz and matzah. Talmud Lemar kikol, the extra kikol, because all sa'ar. Micah Amar, what is this saying? This is a brisa. It's a machlekes Abai and Rava. Taisvus discusses that there's also another opinion here from Zeiri, who's brought in Psachim, that explains this as well. And the question is, who's he going like? Is it Abai or Rava? It can't be like Abai. Maybe it's Zeiri and Rava is the same, maybe not. That's the... Amar Abai says Hachikam, and this is what it means. Sa'or Loisaktiru, I'm adjusting it like the Bach. Eily ala kazayas. I only know if it's a full kazayas, that it's a violation. Chatzi zayas minayin, how do I know that half a zayas is also not allowed to be offered up? Talmud Lemar kol. Eruva minayin, how do I know a mixture? It's kikol.
Just it's okay. For repetitious, no?
Well,
No,
when you see Rava, you'll see. Rashi adds in that what's the problem of Eruvay? He says, well, we're talking about Eruvay that you mixed it in a way that it's not recognizable. According to Abaya, that's the problem. Okay, Rava says, Hachikamer, this is what it's saying. Sa'ar le'saktiru, yeast you should not bring up. Eily ala kaimetz. I only know if it's a full kaimetz. Chatzi kaimetz minayin. Half a kaimetz. How do I know? Talmud Lemar kol. What's the difference Abaya and Rava? Abaya said half a zayas. Rava says half a kaimetz.
Abaya says half a what? His proof is
half an olive size.
that it's okay.
That I would have thought it's okay without the kol.
Okay, right.
According to Rabbi, I would have thought half a kaimetz without the kol.
So it's the measurement. That's that they.
We'll see. Eruva minayin. How do I know if it's a mixture? It's a problem. Talmud Lemar kikol. But my kamiflagi, what's the machlekes Abai and Rava here? So the Gemara explains. Abaya savar yesh kaimetz pachas mishnei zeisen. It's possible that when you do a kaimetz, you don't have two olive size in there. How much do you have? What's
Small hands.
What do you have?
Oh,
You have one zayas.
right.
One zayas plus, but you don't have two zeisen.
And it's okay, right? 'Cause that's
So-
a small, like he says.
What would you bring up? You would bring up one zayas. One zayas plus. So what is the kol including? Half a zayas.
Mm-hmm.
However, now we know that there's a possibility of offering the kaimetz in two steps. We learned that in earlier, that if that the kaimetz could have been brought in two steps. So that means that if the kaimetz is at least a zayas, right? A zayas plus.
Well, that's why if somebody has small hands, it would.
Right.
Okay, so this kaimetz is a zayas plus, and if I could bring up the kaimetz in two stages, that would mean that there's haktara less than a zayas, because the kaimetz itself is only a zayas
Maybe
plus.
you only do it you only do the haftarah after it's brought.
No, 1 second. I do a kmitza.
Yeah.
How much is in my hand now?
That's
Kazayas plus something.
Kmitza, yeah.
Okay, I'm allowed to bring this kaimetz up in two stages. That means each time I put it on the fire, how much am I putting?
A kazayas.
Less than a kazayas.
Well, I'm sorry. You
It's
said
a kazayas plus.
a kazayas plus, right?
So I would divide it in half and put half on. It would
Okay.
be 3/4 of a kazayas, and then I would put another 3/4 of kazayas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, v'yeshaktar b'chusa mikazayas. Rava says, ein kaimetz pachas mishnei zeisim, that a kaimetz has two olives. Ve'ein aktar b'chusa mikazayas. That means if you do it in two stages, each one is going to have a zayas. Now, the obvious question is that maybe if it's a zayas plus, according to Abaya, then how do you know that that the kol is coming to tell me half a zayas? Maybe it's coming to tell me exactly a zayas. Taisvus, as you can imagine, all of this, the details that you can get into here. Itmar. It's a statement. someone brings yeast or honey onto the altar. Amar Rava. Rava says, Leika mishum sa'ar, leika mishum dvash. Leika mishum iruvei sa'ar, mishum iruvei dvash.
He's getting 4.
So what's happening is, he's taking yeast and honey. He's mixing them together. Remember we said that a mixture you learn from Kiko. So he has both here. He's going to get 4 malchus according to Rava. He's sa'ar and dvash, and the kikol of the mixture of sa'ar and the mixture of dvash. Abaya Amar ain't like an alav shebachlalis. Abaya says you don't get malchus when you have a lav shebachlalis. Lav shebachlalis is a lav that includes in it more than one type of prohibition. There's no malchus for that. Ikada Amri, there's 2 opinions here. What does this mean? Chada miyalaki. Some say that what it means that you get malchus only once, but you don't get malchus on the mixture.
Once for each thing.
Once for each thing, right? The Ikada Amri, and some say chadanami loylaki, that you don't even get malchus even once. Why? The loymiyachad lavik lav de chasima. Because the verse that teaches me about malchus says that the shayfet will the pilua shayfet. The verse that talks about getting malchus, the following verse says leisachsim shar b'dishay, that you don't muzzle an ox when it's threshing, when it's stepping on the grain to crush it. Now that's a type of lav that does not include anything else in it. It's only one specific lav. There's no secondary, auxiliary prohibitions that go along on the side.
So that's the smichas of that
so
pasuk?
that smichas teaches me that when do you get malchus, it needs to be similar to lav de chasima, to the prohibition of muzzling an animal. Now, since this prohibition here includes in it the mixture, it includes in it it has these other things that it includes. So this doesn't go under the prohibition, under the category of the prohibitions that incur malchus, because it's not similar to lav de chasima.
So wait a second. So this, I'm just trying to understand this. So it says the malchus, right? It talks about getting malchus, and then next to it, talking about getting malchus, it talks about you're not supposed to do with the behemoth, muzzling your behemoth.
Right.
So we learn from that.
That what type of prohibition incurs malchus is the prohibition of getting of muzzling an animal when it's threshing.
Okay.
Now that's a type of prohibition that's not a lav shebachlalis.
It's only one. It's not a gen. You're saying
it's not a general. It's very specific.